Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you're joining us on the West Coast. Welcome to today's Bright Horizons Solutions at Work webinar, Get Smart, Perfect Your Tuition Assistance Program. We're very excited to have you with us. All right, let's get to the featured presenters. It's a real privilege to introduce Mark and Jessica. Mark is Vice President and General Manager of EdAssist, and in that capacity, he leads our efforts to transform tuition assistance programs. At the moment, we work with more than 150 well-known organizations, and Mark brings, in addition to a lot of other skills, more than 2 decades of demonstrated experience improving adult learning. EdAssist now manages over $480 million tuition dollars each year. And co-presenting with him is Jessica, who leads EdAssist's organizational development. And she focuses in that role on the professional development and onboarding strategies for our business. Prior to this, Jessica served as the Director of EdAssist Client Relations and also held the lead role in the education network that we manage. So she has immense experience bridging the gap between what corporate clients need and what educational institutions are offering. Between them, Mark and Jessica have seen hundreds of tuition policies, and I've seen it. You can watch them look at one policy and pinpoint opportunities for improvement. So we're very lucky to have both of them here in one room at one time to share what they know and, of course, to help you perfect your tuition assistance program. With that, let's kick it off.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. That might have been a little bit of an exaggeration, being able to examine a policy in 1 minute, but we'll take that. Welcome, everyone, to the EdAssist webinar. We're looking forward to spending the next 60 minutes with you and discussing tuition assistance. So in preparation for this webinar, we actually surveyed many of you and asked you what you wanted to hear about today, and we actually designed the agenda around that feedback. And as Jonathan mentioned, we also did a little poll question at the beginning, and the 2 biggest challenges based on your responses were designing policies and then aligning the policy towards the business goals, and we're actually going to cover that in today's seminar. So thank you for that. So given what we've heard, here's what we're going to cover today, and stop us again anytime that you have any questions. We're here to make this as helpful as possible. We'll start with talking about what the overall goal should be for an education assistance program. We'll look at common mistakes that we have seen with companies. We'll also revisit the basics about a policy. We'll cover the BERSIN maturity model. We'll pepper examples throughout our conversations that we've seen with policies. We'll share what we've learned, practical tips, and we'll also discuss how to position this information so it resonates with your executive leadership. And we'll end with a Q&A session. So to start off, historically, companies have seen tuition assistance as merely a benefit focused on supplying money to employees so they can get another degree or even get their first degree. The approach we have taken is to craft your policy so it actually solves your business problems. And that's interesting because that was one of the biggest challenges you identified in the poll at the beginning. Whether the business problem is recruiting new talent or retaining current talent or upskilling your employees, meaning providing them new skills, that is how to think about the overall goal. The interesting part of education assistance programs is they already exist with 70% of companies. It is not a new spend, but a current spend. The question is, how do you use that current spend as a differentiator in the marketplace to solve your biggest business issues? So before we talk about best practices and how to advance your policy, let's discuss some common hiccups or mistakes we see with policies. And we certainly don't want to, come across as being overly critical. A lot of these issues are a result of dealing with old policies that have not been updated over time and have not been updated with best practices. So the first one we see is tuition assistance as a check-the-box benefit. So the way I think about that is some policies just lack a strategy. So educational assistance is considered just another benefit that the company offers, like health care or dental insurance. That's how historically it's been looked at. We were at the Maisie Learning Conference this last week, and I kept asking the L&D, Learning and Development professionals, why they don't consider tuition assistance as a tool in their treasure chest of learning. And the common answer is that historically it has been seen as an entitlement given to employees rather than a strategic tool. And we want to change this perspective and help companies leverage this spend for business purposes. We see many employers have, so the second one is exceptions. So we see many employers, they've developed a really thoughtful policy, but then they proceed to provide many, many exceptions to the policy. And it is very difficult, as you can imagine. If you're a parent, you know this is the case, right? If you tell your kids no cookies before bed and you allow them to have cookies Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, it doesn't really create a very fair, equitable program. And it's the same thing with these policies. It really is a poor user experience to provide a lot of exceptions. And we really recommend looking at the policy, design the policy with the exceptions in mind that you want to make. The third common mistake we see is the skin in the game argument. That's what we call it. So let me give you an example to explain this. So most policies pay for 100% of employees' tuition. So if you go and spend $3,000 for a course, you're going to get reimbursed $3,000. Some employers decide only to pay for 80 or 90% of tuition, saying that the employee needs to have some skin in the game. So in such a case, the employee has to pay the balance out of their own pocket, hence the skin. The reality is the adult learners already have skin in the game. You think about it. They're working full-time and at the same time going to school. They have to obtain the necessary grade to get paid. This is the skin. Plus, if you look at the data, in most companies, the percent of employees who use the program is very low. Often as the employee wants to develop further, the high potentials. So given this, we should try to make these programs accessible and easy to use and not put more hurdles in place and get rid of the skin in the argument, the skin in the game argument. The fourth mistake is rewarding for participation instead of outcome. So the outcome you want as an employer is to make sure the employee has truly gained additional skills, that they have learned something. It should not be enough to sit in a class and merely get paid or reimbursed for time and seat. It should be based on, did they increase their competency? Did they get a good grade? And we'll talk about this some more in a few minutes, but the common mistake here is to accept mediocrity. The fifth common mistake is degrees only. So one of the most common mistakes or myths we hear about is this fact that people think tuition assistance is only for degrees. The applicable law is Section 127 of the Internal Revenue Code. I'm sure you all know that like the back of your hand. And it provides a tax exemption for employer-paid education assistance of up to $5,250 a year from gross income. So an employer can pay up to $5,250 a year tax-free for employees. And there's some other requirements. We won't go into those. But in the earlier years, and I think this is why the myth has been created, because in the earlier years, the $5,250 benefit was available only for undergraduate education. And even then, that was the word, the statute used. It was education, not degrees. But since 2001, 127 covers graduate as well as undergraduate education. Additionally, employees do not have to be enrolled in a degree program, nor does the education have to be job-related, and the regulations are very specific about that. So the statute's very broad. It's not just degrees, it's the employee's education. So now we've gotten rid of that myth. The sixth one is limiting school choice. So most policies allow employees to select just about any school. And there are some policies that attempt to get employees to go to a specific school. And maybe the employer will set a lower percentage payout for most schools, but a higher for a preferred school. We see that sometimes. And that's okay. In some cases, that is fine, as long as there is good educational reason for making that choice. In other situations, we find the preferred school selected is not based on sound educational rationale. It's based on just, somebody's personal preference, somebody's connection to that school. And that tends not to be a very good choice because, the employee is still paying money out of their own pocket, regardless of how lucrative your spend is. And so they, given that, they're going to want some say in what school they get to go to. We're going to address many of these issues in more detail as we talk about best practices and advancing your policy. So let's do that. Let's talk about the basics and benchmarking. So these are the components we're going to cover about the basics components of a policy. And as we talk about these different components, I want to highlight that we will be showing the averages based on about 250 tuition assistance policies that were obtained at a given moment in time. And at that moment in time, most companies have not optimized their policies. So the averages we're going to be reporting are industry norms. They're not based on best practices. And I'm going to highlight where the the industry norm is different than what the recommended best practice is. I hope that makes sense. So it goes to show, you'll see, because there's such a difference between the best practice and the industry norms, it goes to show you how much opportunity there is out there to make these policies more strategic. So let's dig into the first one, which is caps. So given that, as I mentioned earlier, given that 5250 is the cap that the federal government allows, you can imagine that this would be the average across all industries. However, you can see on this chart that the average caps by industry spans from $4.1K, $4,100 at hospitals on the top to $8.1K or $8,100 for pharma companies at the bottom. So why is this important to you? Well, if you're using your tuition assistance program for recruiting and retaining talent, the cap can differentiate you from your competitors. For example, let's say you're a utility company and your undergrad cap is $2,000. You can see on the chart that the average for undergrad for utility companies is 5.3. So you're probably not very competitive with that cap of 2 with tuition assistance, and it could impede your ability to recruit. So our recommended best practice is to determine the cap based on the business needs. So for example, if you are a hospital and you're struggling with hiring nurses, your cap for those nurses may be higher than for your non-clinical degrees. Just one final point on caps is we also see generally higher caps for graduate programs than for undergrad, which kind of makes sense because they tend to be more expensive. So let's discuss eligibility requirements for employees. This is one of the areas where the averages are inconsistent with best practices. So a key question a company needs to answer is how long should an employee have to wait before they're made eligible to take advantage of this strategic tool. You can see in this chart that the largest percent of companies, 38%, allow an employee to join the program immediately. 32% of the companies ask the employee to wait 6 months, and 8% ask employees to wait 3 months. So why is this important? Again, it comes down to competition in the marketplace. If you're struggling with recruiting employees, you may consider not having a waiting period. Just allow them, the day they join, they can start using your benefit. It also depends on benchmarking your industry. It depends on what your competitors are doing. But generally, on a general basis, we recommend a 3-month waiting period. Well, why is that? We recommend this because as an employee joins a company, they need some time to learn their jobs and assimilate to the company. And by offering them 3 months, it still can be used as a recruiting tool. It's not too long, but they still have a wait period. Now, a company may decide to have immediate access if they have significant challenges in recruiting, like I said earlier. The only other exception I would make is that, with our solution, we actually provide educational advising to employees of our clients. So you could allow them to actually engage the educational counselor at the beginning when they first start. With that in mind, 3 months from then they could start their program. So now let's turn to regional accreditation. So many of the older policies don't require any accreditation. They don't specify the level of accreditation, and this is a very confusing area. Many policies will mention accreditation required with no parameters or not a real understanding of what is accreditation. You can see here that only 28% of companies of these policies actually require regional accreditation. Our best practice is to require regional accreditation for all degree programs. The key reason for this is ensuring a good user experience for your employees. At regionally accredited schools, the students will be able to transfer credits to other schools. So the company's investment is leveraged better. Otherwise, if it's a nationally accreditation, the credits may not transfer, and that's not a good use of your dollars. It's not a good experience for the employee.
Mark, this is Jessica. Hi, everyone. I think that's such a good point, and where one's policy can really serve the best interests of our employees. We see it time and time again that regional accreditation, for whatever reason, it's just not intuitive that regional is better than national, right? You would think national accreditation is more strict and more kind of rigid, and actually that regional scrutiny is so important. So by putting into the policy that regional accreditation is required, it really is in the best interest of employees. And I think it always reminds me that you can use your policy to support the employee. It doesn't have to be a compliance tool. It really can be one that aids your adult learners in kind of meeting their goals. So I think that this is a really good example of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jessica. You know, the reality is there are 6 boards that issue regional accreditation, and the reason they have it that way is so you can compare one school to another, and that's why you're able to transfer credits. That's not the case on national accreditation. So a really great point. So now we're going to move to grade requirements. So this is the issue around what grade you require from the employee to actually allow them to get paid. So this issue really is about driving the right behavior of the employee. It kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, and that is this is the company's money and should only be used when the employee is meeting certain grade requirements or competency requirements. So think about it this way. Do you want to pay for a course if the employee doesn't get a passing grade and therefore doesn't get credit for the course? It means they'd have to take the course again. So for most undergraduate schools, you have to earn a C or better for it to constitute a passing grade and get credit. For grad schools, you generally have to earn a B- or better for it to be considered passing. So based on the chart, you can see that the industry norms are right where they should be for undergrad. So about 73% of companies pay for courses with a C or better for undergrad. The problem is with the grad, right? So for grad, 49% of the companies allow the employee to earn a C and still be paid or reimbursed, even though it's not considered a passing grade at most grad schools. So as a result, our best practice is B- or above for grad institutions and C or above for undergrad. That way, you know, you're going to be driving the right behavior that they have to get a passing grade and earn the credit. Now we're going to jump to a concept called credit by examination, which is not a common term these days or a common practice. So it's a growing trend in tuition assistance. What CB is, or credit by examination, is where an employee takes a test and earns credit for the results of that test. So basically they're proving their competency or proving they have an expertise in that content. This prevents them from having to sit in a class for several weeks and then take a test at the end. So although 63% currently of companies don't cover credit by examination, as I mentioned earlier, it's heading in that direction, meaning there are more and more companies that are now covering it. So why is that? Well, part of it is to prevent people from having to sit in a class, like I mentioned, but it also has to do, it's much more cost efficient. You pay about $1,000 for a credit hour, whereas a credit by examination is $99. Just much, much more efficient. We also at the same time encourage our university partners to examine what their policy is for credit by examination, so if people do take advantage of it, the school will recognize it.
And Mark, just to jump in here too, again, the idea of using the policy for the best interest of the employees as well. Credit by examination actually originated to honor all of the on-the-job experience military has received by serving our country. And so actually by allowing for credit by exam within your policy, if you are an employer that is hoping to bring in veteran employees, this can be a really important way to acknowledge that learning. And also credit by exam, one of the biggest barriers to entry for employees to pursue their education, like any of us as adults, it's kind of confidence sometimes, right? Do I have the time to do this? Can I do this? So credit by examination really acknowledges that some of your on-the-job learning is really valid. So it can provide kind of a boost of confidence of, wow, I actually am getting credit for things I already know. I can really pursue this degree. So again, using your policy to kind of support your working adult learners in the way that credit by examination can be a key tool for that.
Thanks, Jessica. Really great point. The next component we're going to talk about is the time requirement for when you have to submit your receipts or your transcripts or your grades. The industry norm in this case is very consistent with the best practice. So our recommendation is 60 days. And you can see 43% of the policies we have here actually use 60 days. So this means, so an employee takes a course ends, how much time do you need from the time the course ends to when they are allowed to submit their receipts and their grades? 60 days is the right amount of time from our perspective because it gives the school enough time to be able to generate the grade and the receipt, and it gives you enough time to upload that into a system or to get that through your approval processes. And it doesn't leak into the next semester, so it doesn't prevent you from not being able to take your course the next semester because you didn't finish out this semester. So again, we recommend 60 days for this one. So the one question we get a lot is, what should a policy cover? What kind of program should it cover? What we want to highlight here on this one is that the industry norm is that 100% of all associates, bachelor's, and master's degree programs are covered by tuition assistance policies. 77% of companies cover individual degrees, and this is a trend. You know, I mentioned earlier that was one of the changes in the 2001 change to 127. And as we mentioned earlier, 127 now as I mentioned, it does cover individual courses, not just degrees. In regards to professional certifications and designations, you can see here that certifications at 62%, professional certifications and designations are at 39%. And this, again, is another trend. We're seeing more and more companies are covering these type of learning opportunities. And I would point out that it's no surprise that the insurance financial services industry provides coverage of 50% of the time because success in the industry is so heavily dependent upon certain certifications or designations, you know, like a CFP or a CPA. Same thing in the healthcare industry. So our recommendation that all these programs should be covered because they all provide learning opportunities for your employees and all different ways of helping your employees with their development. The one thing I'd mention, it's kind of interesting, you know, certificates are becoming very popular because it's a short way to learn a new skill, and it's less costly than a full degree. So now we're going to talk about fees because this is a big issue out there. So why are we talking about fees? Well, over time, schools have been adding fees into their invoices, and this allows them to avoid, you know, increasing tuition on a certain level. Typically, general fees include registration fees, technology fees, and or lab fees. They do not include things like parking or student activity fees. And the question is, do you include them? So our recommendation is you either include no fees, meaning across the board you just say we are not including any fees, so you don't have to deal with this issue because there are so many of them. Of course, this will burden the employee because they will have to pay it out of their own pocket. And for them to be successful, they're going to have to find that money. The other option is to include all fees and just say, we're going to include all fees. We want this to be a great experience for our employees. We're not going to cause them to have any money spent out of their own pocket. This obviously can increase the tuition spend of a company. The middle ground is to cover course-related fees. So if you can't take a course without paying that fee, then it should be covered. So let's take an example. You're taking a science course. You have to take a lab. There's a lab fee. The policy should cover the lab fee. That is our recommendation. Either everything, nothing, or cover fees related specifically to a course. You can also see here we have textbooks. So 59% of companies cover textbooks. It's about half and half based on the 250 policies we looked at. You know, our recommendation again is to cover the textbooks if you're interested in, you know, eliminating all the hurdles for the employee to be successful at achieving their degree. So there's two final topics on the different components of a policy. The other topic is payment methods. So there are really two generally different types of payment methods. There's a reimbursement method, which most companies have, where the employee gets reimbursed. So they have to pay it out of their own pocket. They take the course, they get their grade, and then they get reimbursed. And we can do this through a payroll transfer from the company. It can be done through a check, or it can be done electronically. And then the other option is what we call direct pay to schools. So this is, again, an option that's available for employers who want to make this process very user-friendly for their employees. Because the employee is no longer paying out of pocket. Instead, the employer is paying directly to the school, either through a check or an ACH electronic payment. So our recommendation actually, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you really want a learning culture in your company, direct pay to schools is the way to go. That's our preferred recommendation. The final one is what we're calling other considerations. So what do you do if employees have questions? Where do they go? For example, we in our business, again, we manage tuition assistance programs, and we actually have a contact center employees can call to get questions, or they have the ability within our software to be able to ask questions to our support services team. The other question is around exceptions. We talked about exceptions earlier. This is a really big issue for companies, and again, we recommend not allowing them. Have the policy meet your business needs. Make sure you take into consideration the exceptions, but try not to make exceptions to your stated policy. And then policy revisions we're going to talk a little about later, but really this goes to this issue of every year, just like you review all of your benefits or rewards for your employees, you also need to review your policy and make sure it's current based on current learning needs, based on your business needs.
Mark, I think the key point here, too, is just it's really about communication. So making sure in your policy that people know where to go for questions. If you do have exceptions, that you have a clear process around it and everyone knows about it for equitable treatment, and that if you're going to revise your policy, people know that what is the last revision that happened, what's the date, so there aren't version control issues. These are the type of communication pieces around the policy that become very important when actually using it in practice.
Excellent. Excellent. So now we're going to transition a little bit. So we've been talking about the basics, right? We've been talking about what are the different components of the policies. Now we're going to start transitioning over to how do you advance your policy? How do you make it better? And we think a really good translation for that transition is talking about the maturity model. So this is the maturity model actually was that was developed by BERSIN by Deloitte, which is a research company. And we actually commissioned them to do a research study in tuition assistance, and this is one of the parts of that research study. There are 4 levels, and again, this takes the idea of the maturity model is to take you and help you become more strategic with your policy, more cost efficient, leverage your spend better, right? There are 4 different levels of maturity, and your journey from level 1 to level 4 and as you go from level 1 to 4, you become more aligned with your talent management strategies. Let's talk about level 1. So by the way, I will say this up front. So if you start hearing about this, you're like, oh my gosh, my company's level 1 or level 2, that's okay, right? Because we're all evolving. We're on this continuum of trying to get better. And I would say most companies we initially have interaction with, they're at that 1 or 2 level. So at level 1, organizations offer tuition assistance as a benefit. They have inconsistent standards and policies and program administration across the enterprise. So at these organizations, funding for tuition often comes from a variety of sources. Sometimes tuition is reimbursed. Sometimes the department expenses it. Sometimes it's paid out of an individual budget. And usually these expenditures are not tracked or mixed with other they are mixed with other expenses. So there's really you can't really develop a return on investment. You can't really report on it. In some cases, companies don't even know what schools their employees are going to. So at this level, participation is low for the most part. There can be a sense among employees that the benefit is not being consistently applied. Again, it's merely considered a benefit, not a strategic tool. So what do you have to do to get to level 2? Right, that's the question we always get. How do we get to level 2? And the movement to the next level requires not only the standardization of core policies and administration, but also the linking of the program to specific identified and desired employee and business goals. That's how you get to level 2. So once you get to level 2, then the management of tuition assistance is seen as a tool for employee learning and development. Managers understand how undergraduate, graduate degrees or certificate programs can help an employee meet individual development objectives. That actually becomes a part of the annual evaluation process. At level 2, participation is usually employee initiated, but there is usually some kind of management guidance in the program selection. The program cost is viewed by executives more as an investment in people rather than an operating expense. It starts going in that direction because the results of the program should have an impact on business issues. Now to get to level 3, the program becomes less employee initiated and becomes part of the learning culture. So at level 3, the company has aligned the program with their organization's talent management strategies, In particular, their programs are designed to support recruiting initiatives, help maintain desired retention rates. These level 3 organizations, executives across different enterprise functions are aware of the ways in which the tuition assistance program offers the company an advantage in the competition for talent, and therefore they really support it. Now, important point here, budgets might be administered either centrally or by department, but they are nonetheless tracked and reported at level 3. Also at level 3, the organization selects key schools and gives managers the tools and documentation to help them coach employees in selecting programs. So finally, you get to level 4. So this means you're working strategically with selected educational institutions that can deliver courses specifically designed to develop key employees or to address critical skills gaps. These organizations enter into strategic partnerships with alliances with schools for the purpose of developing and delivering custom degree programs. Now, what distinguishes the most successful organizations operating at this level, the level 4, is their ability to measure the inputs and outcomes of the program and make continual improvements and adjustments over time in response to changing business conditions. So with that, Jessica, go ahead.
I just wanted, I don't want you to poll the audience, but just a mental poll is how many of you have been contacted by schools to set up these programs? And if you haven't, I bet you a colleague has, because it's interesting, you know, when we work with universities, often our university partners who are wonderfully eager to work with companies to help meet custom needs assume that all companies know what they need. And we all know that's a really hard thing. So, and that actually only the most mature organizations are those that are developing and delivering custom degree programs. So feel free when you do get a phone call from a university to ask them questions about what are they seeing in terms of trends, and try to kind of leverage what universities know about kind of the adult learner, et cetera, and get some information from them. But you can really drive those conversations. But I always think it's very interesting that a lot of our university partners assume that most companies are at this level 4 when actually it's only the most mature. And we are getting some questions which we'll certainly address as we go, but also particularly at the end. So again, right, we've all agreed that our common goal is to transform tuition assistance into a meaningful tool that solves problems. So how do we actually advance the program to the next level? So we're going to boil it down for you into just 4 best practices. But obviously there's a lot that goes into it, but we just want you to come away from today kind of thinking through what are some of the best practices to start planning for to get your program to the next level. And these are they. So align tuition assistance with your talent strategy. We'll talk a little bit more. Centralize your program. Celebrate employee achievements. And look ahead to new trends. Let's go a little bit deeper into this first one. So aligning tuition assistance with talent strategy. First and foremost, enlisting your key stakeholders from the start. So I don't know if anyone has heard of the RACI model. So figuring out who your stakeholders are, figuring out who's responsible for tuition assistance, the R, who's accountable, who should be consulted, and who should be informed. Right? So the idea is thinking very strategically around who actually has a stake in tuition assistance and thinking broadly. So let me give you an example. One of our consulting projects that we did for a client of ours, we did some interviews of the C-suite. And we decided to interview the Chief Information Officer about tuition assistance. The first question or reaction that CIO had, she said, wow, no one's ever asked me that. And she gave it a thought. It wasn't dismissive. And she then had about 30 minutes of really important perspective to share. Think about it, right? Chief Information Officer, there's going to be IT needs that she's going to need to fill. That's a skill set that's constantly changing. She also understands kind of from a macro view the importance of certain skills gaps and filling those. So in thinking about your key stakeholders from the broad perspective and from the start. So all of these bullets are kind of self-explanatory, but let me just give you another example for defining your strategy based on your strategic goals. We have a client that actually looked at the strategic plan that the C-suite produced, and took those strategic goals and figured out what skill sets would be needed to deliver on those goals. And from there, aligned the tuition assistance and the internal learning strategy to those specific skills that would be needed to get to the overall strategic goals and the strategic plan. And again, as you go from planning, making sure that you're tracking and analyzing those key metrics, that you're having an agile policy, that you're assessing whether the current policy helps meet your goals or do the needs to be changed. And finally, after you've done all that, right, I realize it's a big task, but making sure you communicate those results. You can be doing great things, but if you're not communicating back to those stakeholders originally, and you're not communicating in metrics and tangible way, then you're not going to get the overall buy-in and ultimately align with your strategy in the way you'd like. Okay, number 2, centralizing your program. First and foremost, this does not mean trying to get all of your departments, your individual departments, to give you their money. We actually mean centralizing the management of the program. And we have seen this be very productive because it provides visibility across all divisions. And that, in turn, allows for increase of efficiency and decrease of redundancy. We'll give you an example. So by one of our clients, by centralizing their program, they actually realized that one division was spending a lot of money on creating internal project management courses. Well, another company was spending a lot of money on external project management certificates. So by coming together, the management of the program, what they did is created a track for people in their company that needed project management skills of several internal courses that they then worked with universities to provide college credit for those internal universities that could then be applied to an external certificate in project management. Only through centralizing the program, however, were they able to see that overlap and identify the potential for more streamlined strategy. I think the other piece here is really by centralizing, you're ensuring equitable treatment of employees. When tuition assistance is administered by division, you'll see challenges in that one manager is approving a regional accredited university, another one is saying national accredited or online programs are acceptable or not acceptable. Anyway, I don't need to beat this horse, but we all know our employees talk, and by centralizing the program, you're going to provide that equitability. Okay, so we'll move to the next one. Recognizing your employees. It sounds quite simple. I think a lot of these do, but I think this is the one we often get most excited about because the first thing that you can do is to track program completion. We, within our system, ask for our clients' employees to check when they've graduated within our system. And then we can report that out. And you can do the same, and that just by asking the question, did you complete your degree, I think there is a recognition. But then with that data, you can create a recognition program. This doesn't have to be a huge budget or huge expense or more administration. We've seen everything as simple where the chief executive officer has written a letter, if not for every single employee, and then that letter gets kind of handed by the manager to the employee when they graduate or complete a certificate.
Hey, Jessica, so we got one question.
Yeah, good.
So the question is, what about a bonus for completing a degree? And that's a great idea. You could see that working. So a third of our clients are hospitals. And they are right now under a lot of pressure to be able to get 80% of their nurses by 2020 their bachelor's degree. And they're doing some really interesting, creative ways of incentivizing them, if that's a word, to get them there. And that might be one option, this idea of creating a bonus if you get a degree. And that could be applied to any industry, frankly.
Absolutely.
It's a good recognition tool.
Absolutely. This is the fun stuff, I think. But it starts with data, ultimately, and consistency. And I think finally, just making sure if you have a learning management or HRS tool where you're tracking internal learning, if you can incorporate your external learning, that's going to be key so that an employee feels that they're recognized for all of their learning, both internal and external. All right, so looking ahead, this is number 4 for aligning and getting your program to the next level. And actually, one of the questions that we did receive earlier on was regarding the idea of if we should, tuition assistance policies can cover prior learning, but that are without an exam. And this is exactly where if you're having a policy that's agile and you're looking ahead at new forms of learning, prior learning assessments, or PLA, is the thing that's happening within higher ed that's getting more and more traction. And it's where the university usually evaluates a portfolio of prior learning. It usually happens at the individual level. There are partners like Learning Counts, et cetera, that does it for the universities. But this is, and then the university provides credit. So prior learning is a really important thing for you to understand within your policy, but ultimately prior learning is a credit that a college provides. So as long as your tuition assistance policy is providing credit for that type of program, you should be fine. But this is a very good example of looking ahead to things like certificates that are happening, these short-term 4 courses that higher ed is now offering to meet the needs of really specific skill sets. Certifications, those are designations, the letters that you have beside your name, a certified financial planner. Making sure that tuition assistance covers those as well because they're often very job specific and job required. And also things like boot camps, one-day courses. But again, if they're meeting your company's needs, cover them because actually it will discourage an employee from getting a very expensive degree when actually they could get a quick certificate and meet their goals and yours.
Yeah, we've gotten some questions about this issue regarding what does 127 cover, and it kind of goes back to the beginning of the seminar, but just the specific question we got was, are certificates covered by 127? Again, you know, there is this myth out there that it only covers degrees, but it's very broad, and I think we work with a law firm, and we're not experts. We got to do that disclaimer, and you should definitely consult with your counsel, but our reading of 127, it's very broad. The only thing that ever our attorneys have said it doesn't include are if you're going back and paying for an already earned degree. If you're going back and trying to pay student loans or pay for an already earned degree, that would not fall into 127. But anything related to moving forward, you know, on your learning and your development, that would be covered.
Great. Good. So that really is looking ahead. And now we're going to move to some best practices. So now that you have kind of moved your program to the next level through working kind of through these best practices, let's just talk about some communication. We'll go through this quickly, but I think ultimately is just through some basic steps. So step 1, addressing your entire workforce demographic when you're communicating about tuition assistance and communicating the benefits. So whether you have unions, understanding that a comprehensive policy is going to need to meet the union workforce over multiple years before the union contracts are renegotiated. Understanding that millennials, we actually did a research study recently, and our research found that millennials value professional development just as much as they value salary increases. So understanding that tuition assistance can be a key recruitment and retention tool for millennials, and communicating to that group through maybe young professional groups, et cetera. Line workers, tapping into the institutional knowledge that your frontline workers have, but showing them that tuition assistance can help them upskill into a new role within the organization, and tying your tuition assistance policy to your career pathing is going to be key. And then finally, with baby boomers, why communicating tuition assistance to them is important is if you cover short-term learning opportunities like certificates, you can actually help them kind of fill a skills gap that's going to be key for your organization, but also acknowledge that a 7-year degree program for them is not going to probably be in their personal goals because retirement is coming soon. So step 2, just work as a talent management team. We, as Mark said at the conference we went to, a lot of the learning development folks didn't even have tuition assistance in their purview. So really getting together, because understanding and being able to articulate that tuition assistance has recruitment benefits, has organizational and skills gaps benefits, and can actually be a key to succession planning and ultimately to recruitment and retention, is going to be why you can actually get this whole group together and how you'll get this whole group together. And finally, like anything, the negotiating strategy of making sure that you communicate in a way that gets at the what is in it for that person. So understanding what keeps the administrator up at night, meaning the payments and policy, by showing that your tuition assistance program is going to alleviate any of these challenges, by speaking to the C-suite, by tracking, having the data, being able to tell the ROI story, by making sure that employees understand that your program is easy to use, that you're not trying to create barriers to entry. So again, this is how you communicate all that you have now done with your policy to get to that next level within your organization. And then remembering that managers are a key group of stakeholders here as well. Okay. All right.
So I thought I'd hit a few questions, Jessica. So one interesting one we got is, what is a good admin system? What are programs to use for tuition assistance reimbursement? Well, I guess we're one. That's a choice. The way I'd answer that is, I think here are some questions you should ask yourself as you evaluate different companies that do this. One is, do they have a compliance team that actually are really good at making sure that every transaction complies with the company policy? Two, do they offer some kind of education or financial advising to help your employees make good choices, so that they're going to the right school that fits the right program and also meets your company needs? What payment options do they have? Are they good at moving around money and getting payments to schools on time? And that goes to another question we received, which is, do you negotiate to pay the school after the grade is received? And the answer is yes. We have a very specific way of doing that. We also have a team of people who actually deal with payments with schools and having relationships with schools. So I think payments, understanding how companies make payments for you is really key. And then finally I would say, is it a user-friendly service? Are they really focused on providing a really great service to your employees? Because that's the last thing the employees should have to worry about is the school going to pay it? Are they going to get their check? They should be worried about, working and completing their education. The other question we received is, this one's for you, Jessica. What about school credit for lifelong learning without an exam?
Hopefully I already answered that just a bit, but that really is called prior learning assessment. And I think that ultimately is being aware that it exists, encouraging your employees to understand it, and talk to their universities and about receiving credit, and providing a portfolio assessment is going to be really the most important point in creating a powerful tuition assistance program.
Well, thank you. We're running short on time here, so let me just do a quick little summary, and we have a couple announcements for you. So, your employees, as we've been talking about, desperately want to continue to learn and develop. And if you don't provide it for them, they will find an employer who will. When managed well, tuition assistance programs can be an important tool in addressing today's most serious business challenges, and I think we went through the reasons for that. And your tuition assistance program can only meet its full potential if you set a specific strategy and goals for the program. Finally, your tuition assistance has three primary stakeholder groups, as Jessica mentioned: the executives, the managers, the employees, the administration. You should also have three primary business sponsors: talent management, learning and development, and benefits. That's kind of a summary of the key takeaways from today. I'm sure you had many others. And we also want to offer to you on the next slide, you can see we have an offer for all the people on this call today. We know you probably still have some questions, and if you do have questions, you're welcome to give us a call, and we'll be glad to spend 30 minutes with you and actually do a quick little policy consultation. And you can actually reach out to me, and I can help coordinate that. My email address is mward. That's M as in Mark, Ward at edassist, EDASSIST.com, and we'd be happy to help you. And whether you worked with us in the past or have not been able to work with us yet, we're happy to offer you a no-obligation one-on-one conversation about your policy and how we can help you advance it, because that's what we're here for. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back to Jonathan. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, I have a couple other housekeeping announcements. And before I get to that, I just want to check if there's one other question that you want to cover, Jessica?
So we did get one. And I'll actually ask you, Mark, have you seen reimbursement on a sliding scale by grade? For example, C gets a 90% and B gets 100%.
We have seen that. We don't recommend it, because if the employee is actually, like we talked about earlier, if the employee is actually achieving the passing grade and getting credit, we think that you should reimburse them the full 100%. Because again, the whole idea around only giving them a percentage based on grade is the skin in the game. Like, we want them to be able to get an A, and we want to have skin in the game. And that's not really the point here, right? The point is we want them to develop new skills. We want them to develop in the company so you can support the business needs. We would recommend not having that kind of policy in there.
Wonderful. Just trying to get as many of these questions answered as possible, so we appreciate you guys being flexible with us. And also thanks for all of the wide-ranging questions. So one final thank you to Mark and Jessica and to all of you. I want to share a couple other opportunities for you to join us as we look ahead through early 2016. So in addition to our Solutions at Work webinar series, which you are now a part of, each year we also host a live event for HR and business leaders. And the national event is Solutions at Work Live, which is a multi-day event, invitation only, and packed with networking opportunities as well as expert presentations and panels. So if you want to hear more about that event and be part of it, the easiest way to do it is sign up for our newsletter by visiting the link here and just follow those quick instructions, and you'll hear a lot more about learning with EdAssist. So thank you again for attending and participating, and we look forward to speaking with you guys all again soon. And if you want to, there is a survey. You can give us your feedback on this event really quickly, so we appreciate that feedback as well. Thanks, and have a great day.